I just wanted Dr. Tucker to check my occlusion and my contacts to see if there was anything he would adjust before sending this off.
So it's really easy to see with how you've made your model transparent that you have like this belly. See how the belly's there? Your contacts are fine until the bottom side of the belly. You got to remove all that. It looks like a nice huge contact, but it won't seat. So that belly, if we look at it directly there, you need to reduce the bottom half of that so that as you seat it, you don't have that contact in that belly issue. You're gonna flatten all of that out so it slides in nice. If your contact is underneath the height of contour of the adjacent tooth, it's not gonna seat till you adjust it. Now, as far as the occlusal contacts, it looks good. We can also turn on the opposing model just a little bit. You could add a contact right in that area because there's a nice, see that nice cusp that's in there?
Yep.
So we can zoom way in. So I would add just a tiny contact right in there just because you can, and it's a nice stable position.
Okay.
Otherwise, there's nowhere else on the mesial to really add that. Like you can see you're pretty close right here, but to add it, you would have to make that model, you'd have to make your crown taller than the adjacent tooth. So we don't want to make this marginal ridge really tall just to get a contact.
Right.
So you just leave it off.
What tool would you use to take the belly off now? What one do you like?
The wax knife.
The wax knife.
So
okay.
you could use the wax knife, the subtraction tool. You could also use the morphing tool. The morphing can get a little crazy, and I'm not going to do it because there's no back button here, but you can pull different areas in or push different areas out. So like in this area, I could slide it right in there and just reduce it just a little bit. I'm going to show you. See how it just kind of shrunk that area just a little bit? So if you reduced it from down here, you could pull it in or go back to that waxing tool and just subtract from the bottom half.
And that one cusp that you were saying you could bring it up a little bit, what would you use to do that?
So if I was going to do that, I would use a morphing tool because it will keep the anatomy, but you don't want to make one marginal ridge a lot taller than the other marginal ridge, so I wouldn't really do it. You could get a contact right in there, but you're going to make it like this big step to your marginal ridge, so I wouldn't really do that anyway.
Okay.
I like it when they're lined up just like this side. This side's actually a little tall. You can see that marginal ridge area out in this little corner out here is a little taller than this corner, so I would, again, I'd go to the morphing tool. I'd just grab it a little bit and bring it down just a little bit until I liked kind of where it was sitting. But that's pretty much it.
Done most of the designing here. I just wanted to get a check on the size of the contacts, if they're in the right spaces. Basically, final check before I finish it off.
So
for now,
one thing, just looking at it, right?
Yeah.
So one thing I always do when I'm checking somebody else's stuff or my own. See this area right here? If you look at the contour of your adjacent crown, this crown actually hangs over there a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to turn that off, and you can see we got this huge kind of weird contact belly thing going on with a big indent right here.
Yeah, I tried to smooth some of that down because the contact was so large, which is why.
So what you're going to do, but see how you actually made a divot?
Yes, yeah.
So you're going to have to add that back and then reduce this a little bit. The easiest way to do that is just with the smoothing tool. This is the smooth, right? So if you just come in, didn't do the right tool. So if you come in, and I'm going to turn this off a little bit more, and then just kind of, you have a weird, did you turn something funky on?
I don't think so.
What you got? What are all these measurements you got going on?
I don't know.
There it is. All right. So then you just kind of smooth it out. We're going to make it a little heavier. We're going to kind of smooth out that area. It's going to do it nice and slow, and then it'll adjust your contact. See how I took that belly away, but I went too far.
Yeah.
So now we're just going to add, we're going to do it less intense. It's going to add kind of nasty, because it always does.
Yeah.
And then you just take your smoothing tool with less influence, bigger area, and kind of blend it all together. And what you want to see is your undercut disappear and your contacts stay there. So we're getting there, but see how I've got like this sharp edge over here now? So you just kind of take it around there, See, we're slowly getting there,
Yeah,
right? So you just kind of add a little more up underneath here. You can also use this morph tool. So on the morph tool, we're going to go a little smaller. We're going to go a little smaller. And you put it in that area and you can kind of pull it out.
Gotcha.
See, that's a little easier for these divots, right? Because I just
for
filled
sure.
that whole thing in
Right,
without
that's
doing
great.
all that adding and subtracting. So you just kind of morph that area out. And then we may want to just add a little tuck right there. And it's going to give us a really heavy contact. But then if we go back, go to smooth, I'm going to get a little bit bigger influence this time and just kind of smooth that area out a little bit. Now we've got a decent contact, right?
Okay.
We got a little bit of a sharp spot right there. Okay, so it looks pretty good. Nice and flat, no undercuts. So the other thing that you've got a little weird setting. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. So this is your contacts, right? You really want to. So that was showing you 1 millimeter contacts.
Oh, okay.
So all of this that's colored is within 1 millimeter. So you want to really turn it down to 0, and that'll show you your actual contacts.
Gotcha.
Which those are in great spots.
Okay.
Okay. So you want to do the same thing. You've got that undercut on that side.
Yeah,
Your contact's in a nice spot. It's nice and high. So I don't think yours is like the others we were talking about had bellies, right? I don't think yours really has a belly. Neither does that side. But we want to fill in this little void area. You can kind of see it's just kind of a void. So go ahead and fill that in. Other than that, there's one little spot right there that's a little thin. Right? So theoretically, you should fill that in. Honestly, it's fine, but for the purposes of this, I would probably go back to your morph tool and just pull it out just a tad and it'll disappear.
Perfect.
Okay,
Great.
everything else looks good.
Awesome.
You just need to, there's one little spot right there that's also a little thin. That's it. Okay.
It'll tell you if you're too thin.
That was that little maroon spot.
Yeah, the little shading.
That
Okay.
little shaded area right there.
Sounds good.
All right, so fix that up.
One was kind of the overall anatomy. When I go for and make it a centrum contact, I kind of lose the shape, the normal
So you're
anatomy
probably
of the
using
two.
the wrong, is this the tool you're using?
I've used a mixture. I was using the wax tool and the single.
So the morphing tool is great if you're going to change this, like the position or size of a
Right.
cusp or a contact. But if you're trying to develop anatomy, you can see you've kind of dug away
Right,
your anatomy in that area. It's kind of just flat inside there, right?
right,
So I'm going to turn this all the way down to 0 because right now those are your contacts,
right.
right? So we just really need to develop some anatomy. So we're going to go back to that waxing tool, add on a little bit of thickness, and then we're just going to kind of add our anatomy back. Now we've got that in there, but we're going to smooth it out a little bit
Oh,
because that's a smoothing tool.
right, right.
So that'll start to give you back some of your anatomy that's kind of disappeared because we're missing a lot right here.
Right, right.
But let's turn on the opposing and see if there's a particular reason. So you do have a deep kind of cusp in there, right?
Right.
So it may just be what you've got, but you can see there's definitely room to add out in these areas. And you can leave that on just like it is and add a little bit. I mean, that's obviously in the wrong place, but
Right.
we can go undo. But you want to be able to turn that, maybe add a little bit here, maybe add a little bit in this area, and then take your smooth tool. And you can do it kind of while this is in this half visible range. Now see how it won't like go away? It's smoothed it out all the way, so I'm going to actually have to hit the negative button to take away a little bit.
Right.
But you want your, like you said, you want your contacts in your central faucets and on your cusp tips, right?
Right.
So with where your cusp is hitting, you should have one like right there,
Okay.
because it's like right at the height of that cusp, right?
Right.
So this is kind of on both outside edges of that cusp. So right in there, and maybe even reduce that a little bit, just like we just did. We took that off.
Right, right.
And then if I got that spot right, I'm just looking at where your contact is, probably right there. We're just going to add that plus.
Now, what tool is this?
This is the wax knife, just
Okay.
the adding. So now that I've got that contact there, then I'm going to turn the opposing model off again and figure out how to fill in. You can see there's a little void there.
Right,
So
right.
fill all that in and make it all look nice.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Cool.
The other thing you can do, so it looks like you had a little bit of a hard time
with the occlusion, right?
Right, I was just messing around with.
Well, so that's fine, but maybe we need to redo maybe we need to put a
that'd be good.
new anatomy back in there. So you just go back, and have it put it in there.
How do you do that?
Just the back button.
Oh, nice.
So this is your margin,
Right.
right? So when we go forward, actually, let's see what this. So there's a lot of tools in here that we're really not using. This mirror tool, you can choose a tooth from the other side and mirror it on the other side.
What's going on here?
We can also reset the design. So if you just click that button, it'll
I just
reset.
noticed this.
So that's what that is. If you look at that, it's going to go all the way around, right?
Right.
That's just the visual of where your margin is and the minimal thickness of the material. It won't actually print that or mill that.
Gotcha.
But it's going to go all the way around your crown.
Okay.
And that's just part
So
of it.
that's not an overhang.
No.
Okay.
But so for you, this button right here, reset design, if you just hit that, it'll reset it like it originally was,
Right.
and then you can kind of tweak it in. Because you've kind of lost all of your
Yeah.
anatomy, right?
Yeah. I'll probably do that then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Looks correct. So I've looked at it, from the occlusal, from the mesial and the distal, but I just want to make sure, what's considered would be considered an overhang, because I think the blue is the original and the red is the.
I'm not sure. To be honest, I've never seen a blue and a red before.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure if that's an update or if that was the original and where you put it. Not sure about that.
I've been adjusting with the red. I think the blue was the original.
Oh, was it? Okay.
When I've
like I
moved
said,
things, it looks like it's the
so
red.
one area, like right here, so that's the great thing about this tool, right? Have you been using that at all?
I haven't been.
So what that is that's going to tell you where your margin is. See how as I go out toward my margin, it shows me I'm out on the edge. So it's a cross section of that spot.
Okay.
Now, where do you turn that on?
It's defaulted on right now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So you can see like I'm way in here and it shows me I'm way in there. So there's some areas like right here, I think you're just a tad short. You can kind of see it's just starting to get out there on that corner.
So I could just click and it.
Yeah, just see, and you can kind of really see it from that cross section view. Like right, so it should be kind of out here. So that's the easiest way to check is to go around and see you're overhanging there. See how far down you are?
Yeah, I see that.
And your cross section is going to show you. See it, so it shows me I'm down from that margin.
Right there. Okay, great.
So you want to make sure on that cross section view, your margin's up here.
Okay.
And you just want to, so that cross section is really helpful. And the other thing is just looking at it like this, you can see your margins up here, right?
Yes.
So as you kind of spin it around, it's just easy to see. You're a little over your margin there. You're a little tiny, you're over your margin from here to here.
Okay.
But you're also under from like there to there.
Okay.
Does that make it?
Yeah, it does. I'll mess with that. Okay.
When we're looking at this, I'm just checking on it, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know. Are these too far on the buccal surface?
A little, maybe a little tiny bit, but we can turn on your opposing cast and kind of see where they're hitting. If they're hitting kind of in the central groove, then they're fine. But yours, they're a little tiny bit on that buccal surface. So I would just reduce just the front edge a little bit and see if you can't centralize them on the cusp tips.
Okay.
This one's a little big.
Okay.
Like if we turn on your, so if we turn on your anatomy or your distance map here a little bit, you can see you're pretty close to getting another contact there. You got that contact, those contacts are nice. This one's just a little big. My main concern with yours is gonna be those bellies on the contacts. You can see how from here to here, let's turn on your model. So you're kind of invading that adjacent tooth, right? Because your contact's so big, we want all of this is actually invading into the adjacent tooth. You can really see it from that angle, right? You see that? So you need to flatten that out, this side too. And then the other part is
So from at what point do I start taking away?
right in here. You got to take all that away. So this is your adjacent tooth form, right? I'm going to make it a little darker. So this is your adjacent tooth form, and it should come straight across there. So your contact is actually penetrating into the adjacent tooth. So you want to make that flat so that the flat surface is against the flat surface. And then yours is a little too tall as well. You can see the adjacent tooth morphology. It comes this way, and then right about there, from here to here, is an undercut into the adjacent tooth. Not your crown. Your crown actually looks good, but it's because it's penetrating, right? So if you're just looking at the adjacent tooth from about there down, you got to reduce, so you got to make it flat, but then you also got to lift this area up so your contact's just way up high, kind of up at the coronal third, or coronal half at least. And then same thing on this side. You're just kind of penetrating in there. Sometimes when you turn the distance map on a little bit, it'll give you a little more information as far as where that's hitting. I'm going to turn this off for a second. You can see you're all really solid all right there, right? So this all has to go in.
So should it just be this little section?
So it should be like this little area right up here. Okay. And that's a nice big fat broad contact, but it can't go so deep.
And again, you'd use the wax knife there.
I'd use the wax knife or the morphing tool to start. If we go over to this morphing tool, it's a nice way to get started. We'll come in here and we'll put it right in the middle, and we'll just kind of reduce that area a little bit. See how it just flattened it out for us? So if we can get it to go on the side here. So it kind of took all that away. It's still too tall, but we could add a little more. I'm going to add a little over here. I'm going to add a little over here. And then I'll probably, to get rid of yours, I would probably go to the, I would turn this up a little bit, and then just smooth out this bottom area. See how I just shrunk it up there? And then right here in the middle, I think you're a little heavy, so I'm going to smooth that area a little bit. See how it's flat now?
Yeah.
And then just reduce a little bit, just kind of lift it up higher more towards the occlusal surface. Now let's turn on our model again and see how we're not penetrating anymore. It's just a nice contact. It's pretty broad still. I might reduce a little more up here just because of the way the tooth comes in. It almost looks like we're wrapping around the edge just a little bit. And you can always do this with it on there. But that's a nice big fat broad contact. But you want to make sure, as I look down on it, like on this side, you can see it's penetrating in there. We want no penetration. Okay?
Are the main tools you're using the wax knife and the morphing tool?
Those are the two, yeah.
Is there a third one you would suggest they?
Not really. I mean, in the beginning, you can use this, and it'll kind of change the general shape of the tooth. But I wouldn't do this once you've kind of fine-tuned things.
Okay.
That's just a single tooth tool. And then if you've really messed it up, you can always hit the reset button. But then over here, I'm just smoothing again. I'm just trying to smooth it down a little bit. I love the smoothing tool. If something's just too big, you just kind of take it down and it'll just kind of slowly reduce
the smoothing tool more than use the subtracting one?
Yes.
Take away?
I always try smoothing before I try subtracting.
Okay.
Now in this area, you're going to have to make it kind of real small, right? Because we're just trying to reduce off the facial here. And you just kind of drag it across there. See how it's just shrinking it up on that facial? So I want that contact to be right up here. So you just kind of shrink it away, blend it all in down here, and get it kind of smaller. That's still a little bit, so we might add just a tiny bit right back there. And then smooth again on that, just over everything we just did, until you kind of get it right where you want it, kind of on that cusp tip. That's a little on the facial, right? I want it kind of right back there. I'm gonna let you finish.
Okay.
But yeah.
Do we want them like that size?
No, you want it
here?
smaller. You
So
really want
that size right there is
yeah,
fine.
that's
Just
good.
more
This
on
is
the
a little
facial.
big, because what this doesn't show you is it's going how far it's penetrating into the adjacent tooth, right?
Yeah.
So if I have a rounded area, I'm going to be penetrating in,
Okay.
and you're going to have to adjust your occlusion. But if I have a little point
So about
contact,
that size.
it's going to have a nice point
Now,
contact.
can you flip that over so you see how far it's penetrating into the other tooth,
Uh,
and then adjust it from that side?
You can turn your model on a little bit, but it's not going to show you because of the three-dimensional kind of shape.
Oh.
It's not going to show you quite as well. You can kind of see it there, right? So from there to there, you're going to have to adjust that contact a little bit. But if you thin it out, let's go move to the one we were just doing. Where'd it go? Right there. It'll show us. See how it can't penetrate because it's so small?
Yeah.
So we just want nice little contacts. This is going to be penetrating quite a bit into that cusp. And you can see that right there. That cusp kind of comes down right through there. So you got almost 1/10 of a millimeter you'd have to adjust. Okay. And if we turn it down to 0 again, that's where we really want to see those kind of nice tight contacts.
Okay. Is the one?
Let me see what this does.
No, I was pulling the die out so I could work on the interproximal areas of the other dies, and it bumped to the institute and chipped off easily.
Okay, so that went too far. So in dentures, there's another element that you can click on that will actually cut your anatomy, cut your contacts to being flat, so that you're never penetrating in. And it's a little button on the next tool where I just was. All right, so when we have the contacts that are a little heavy, one of the other things you can do to make sure it's not penetrating is click on this button right here. This is your contacts and smoothing. And this is telling you that you're gonna adjust your occlusion. And so in this situation, it's gonna adjust your occlusion to 0.05 millimeters. If I click that button, it's gonna automatically take everything down to 0.05 millimeters. So if I want it at 0, let's just watch and see what happens. It's gonna take those and give me these little point contacts because I told it to go to 0. I'm gonna go back. So you can also do that for your interproximals right here, 0.05, so that you know how we were talking about you were penetrating into that other tooth. If I click on that button, it's going to take my contact. Now see how it made it an indent? Because it took it to 0.05, it took it in so that there was that space. We want there to be contact, so we don't want that. But you could take it down to 0. Oops, not -1. And then hit play, and let's see what happens there. See how it made it flat?
It has lines.
And it's just got a little tiny contact, one little tiny point. We want more than that. But those tools are there. You can adjust those so they kind of go out.
What was that tool called?
It's under the smart tools right up here underneath where the morphing and waxing tools is. It's called contacts and smoothing.
Okay.
Is there a certain like size that you want the contacts?
So this is the part when I was talking about every lab's a little different. So when you send your first case to a lab, they're going to design it because the lab scanner or because your scanner and the lab milling machine may be a little different. This is the part that'll have to get fine-tuned. So when you first start using a lab, you'll say, hey, the contacts were a little heavy, and they'll make them a little smaller. Or you're going to say, hey, you took them away, there were no contacts still, they'll make them a little bigger. But eventually you'll get fine-tuned between your machine and their machine to where it's perfect every time. So they'll just have to go down and hit those buttons, and it'll make them perfect.
So you don't change those until you've talked to...
No, till you've talked to the lab. I wouldn't. So this system is a lab software. You're never going to use this system. This is to teach you what the lab's looking at, to teach you how to make a crown and what's involved. You'll use this system here, but when you're out in private practice, you'll never use the system.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So let's use the tools. See this tool over here? Go float up there a little closer to your margin. So that's your margin tool. This is a cross section where that red line is of your margin. So it'll show you you're a little over contoured right there. See how I'm over the margin there? Your margin's actually like right up there a little bit. So you're over contoured just a little bit from that cross section. The other way you can tell is if you really zoom in, you can kind of look at it, see how you're kind of over your margin right there?
Yeah.
So you just go around and make sure that your margin's all nice and lined up. You can actually take away the rest of your prep.
Oh, that sounds good.
See how you're over your margin.
Now, how did you do that?
Right up here in this corner.
Upper right?
Yeah,
Okay.
this will turn on and off everything but what you've selected.
Okay.
So just make sure, so it looks like you're over your margin just a little bit on this corner. You just make sure as you kind of spin it. This is great, it's right up at that angle, right? Right at that angle, right at that angle. So you want to make it all kind of like that. So over here on this side, you're a little over contoured. You can kind of see it on that cross section.
So I'll have to make it more like over here.
So right here, you're great. See how you're right out at that edge? That's where you want everything. So as we come around the corner, you're good, and then you're kind of low, and then you're kind of low. See how you're kind of dropped down underneath that edge?
Yeah.
So you just got to put that all back.
Okay. Thank you.
This shows you kind of everything else where it's close. So turn them all the way down to 0 so we can figure out where your contacts are. The other thing we're going to do is make your preps kind of see-through. So nice, you got your contacts nice and high, right? We don't have bellies. In this situation, I think you almost took too much away. Can you kind of see how it kind of goes in and then kind of goes this way?
Yeah.
So we need to add a little bit here so we fill in that embrasure space so that we don't get food impaction. Same thing over here. You got a little point contact. We want a little longer contact, like maybe down to here.
Okay.
And then this needs to come out to here. So it's kind of got that nice rounded shape. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because you're kind of like,
it just got taken up a lot.
yeah, we need to be concave instead of convex.
Okay.
Is that right?
No,
No,
convex.
convex instead of concave.
How do you make it more convex?
So all we're gonna
Use the
do
wax
is,
or that.
the easiest way is this morphing tool. You're gonna slide it right up underneath there and you're gonna go, so this is taking too much, it's too big. So I'm gonna go and shrink it down a little bit. Can you see it's changing a little bit?
Yeah, it's more.
And you want to get way on that interproximal area. So now it's convex instead of concave. And it left my contact up there just little. One of the things I was just showing somebody else, this button right here is a smart tool of your contacts. If I click this play button, it's going to take your contact out of occlusion 0.05 millimeters. We don't want to do that. We want it to touch. So I'm going to click maybe like 0.02, then hit play. And then that's going to give you a nice little contact, right? I think that's too small, but you can play with that a little bit if you want to and adjust your contacts. Because right now, if we look at it from the top, it's invading into the other crown. Same thing with that right up there, right? It's close, but it's invading. So, yeah, just kind of tweak those areas a little bit. The other thing that we'll look at real quick here is the opposing tooth. So we're not going to get any contacts in here. There are no cusps here, but you could pick up a contact right here pretty easily because of where that opposing tooth is, that opposing cusp tip. So I would try to add a little contact right in there. And if I'm looking real close, see how this is kind of got cut down?
Yeah.
It kind of goes underneath the marginal ridge of the adjacent tooth. So you want to lift that up until it's even with the other tooth. Otherwise, food's going to get kind of packed in there.
How can you tell when it's even with the other tooth or going through the other tooth?
You mean on this?
Yeah.
Well,
So, I mean, the opposing tooth, when you lift that ridge up, how can you tell if it's going through the image or even?
oh, well, it'll give you a contact.
Oh, it will.
Yeah, it'll give you a contact. So if I pull this up here, it'll give you a nice heavy contact.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense.
So it's a little low, so I would come in here and I just kind of pull this area up and it gave me that little contact. And see how it's raising that whole section? So I've either got to shrink this as little as possible so I can just raise that corner over there. Did you see that? How it just raised this little corner and not the whole tooth?
Yeah.
And kind of brought it up to where almost there. Now, we're gonna not be able to take it all the way to the opposing tooth or the adjacent tooth because of where that cusp is sitting, but we got it close. And then we also picked up that marginal ridge contact, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so just kind of fine tune them.
Okay, thank you.
Got all these in here, right?
Yeah.
And so let's turn on your anatomy. And so that's the contact, right? So if we can turn on your opposing, like all those areas are sticking through your adjacent teeth, right? So we've got to move this bit in a bulk way. So what we're gonna do, let me turn it back to like it was. We're gonna click on this button right here, single tool under single tooth tools. This is kind of a global tool, so this will just kind of shrink us down,
Oh, nice.
right? And then when we say, look, it sticks out a little farther, and it looks like it may need to be rotated just a little bit. So we're going to rotate just a little bit, and then we're going to shrink it down on this side a little bit. So we're making it kind of the same dimensions. Then we're going to kind of look at everything, make sure contour-wise, it might need to come in just a little more. Maybe we took it too far there. We're going to come out a little bit. So we want it to have kind of the same contour as the adjacent teeth. Right, and then maybe it's still just a tad too high. We can shake that down a little bit. And then when we get close, see our marginal ridges are now pretty close, right? But our cusp tips are way too high. So now we're gonna go over to this tool, which is our morphing tool. And it's gonna grab something and move it down. So I can grab this cusp and just kind of move the whole cusp where I want it. So I can just kind of slowly shrink that cusp in a little bit, shrink this area over a little bit, and see, you can actually move this wherever you want. But see, it's showing you where your minimal prep is. That's what that little halo is in there. So I'm going to put it down, but then I'm going to hit backwards. So we're a little thin right there, so I'm going to lift it a little bit. I'm going to sink that a little bit. We're going to turn it from this angle, sink this in a little bit. And then you just keep adjusting it. When you get it kind of fine-tuned, close to where you want it, then you're going to take, I'm just going to adjust a little bit more for you. So we're getting close, right? We got a contact, couple of contact. Now we're gonna go into this tool, which is our wax knife, where we can add wax, subtract wax, or smooth wax. I like to just smooth wax and just kind of smooth things out a little bit. See, now we got a little contact up there. We don't want contact over on this. We want it kind of up at the cusp tip. We can kind of add that in there. We're gonna move those over a little bit. We don't really want this contact. We want one down here, right? So we're going to turn on our opposing and kind of see where our cusp tips sit.
So are you just smoothing there most of the time?
This was all smoothing, yeah.
Not subtracting?
Well, this is subtractive.
Okay.
So I don't really want this contact, right? It's kind of on a deflective surface. But then I'm going to add a little bit right in here because this is where I want my contact.
And you are adding with,
I'm adding with the plus. And then I'll turn my opposing model, so you can turn it all the way on and turn it all the way off and see where it's at. See, it's still on a deflective contact, and I made that big thing, so I'm going to smooth that out a little bit. But then you're going to add a contact right back in there. I just did a lot of it for you. So you're going to smooth these areas out. You're going to make that a little thicker, because that's a minimum thickness right there. And then kind of adjust your contacts.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, thank you. So our contact